This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another edition of 3MA, celebratory breaking news edition of 3MA as K-State gets the commitment from five-star tight end, local kid, Linkon Cure, continuing to dominate, relatively speaking at least, on the in-state front. And K-State pulls in, arguably, I guess maybe this is a part of the conversation today, the highest-rated high school prep recruit that they have ever pulled in as a program. So certainly a day worthy of celebrating. You know how to do it with our friends at Holiday Distillery. Get your Penn Holiday bottled in bond bourbon or your 360 vodka. Raise a glass of either, maybe both. Mix it up a little bit, and you'll be doing plenty of that at Bill Snyder Family Stadium, watching Linkon Cure once he gets here to play for the Cats. So support our friends at Holiday Distillery, great K-State folks who support us here on the pod. Long rumored that Linkon Cure was a K-State lean, and look, when you see him taking visits to Kansas and Texas A&M, particularly probably those two. I know Oregon was really the main threat here, but you're watching him go to the in-state rival. You're watching him go to see Colin Klein. It definitely gets a little bit antsy for fans waiting around to get the K-State commitment as that happened. But Derek, I know we just talked earlier this week about the fact that you felt pretty steadfast in this the entire time that he was going to be a Cat. So ultimately probably wasn't all that much to worry about here. And K-State did a good job handling this recruitment top to bottom with a kid who was grew up a K-State fan. And this is a part of where your in-state dominance and just being a solid program over the years has helped pay off.
Yeah, very little drama to this recruitment, despite some people trying to make it a little bit more entertaining and contentious than it probably was. Texas A&M, was there, but not seriously considered. I think they were given just a crack because of the Colin Klein connection. KU, because of his brother and being that in-state school, would still give him a lot of attention. But really, it came down to K-State and Oregon. Like you said, a big K-State fan. He grew up, a huge fan and watching Colin Klein, which really got this recruitment, sped up pretty quickly and headed down the right track when Colin Klein was recruiting him, along with Brian LePack. So K-State doing so well when they handed that off once Colin Klein went to Texas A&M was a very big key. Brian LePack was very instrumental in that because he was the consistent presence in that recruitment. But then Matt Wells and Connor Riley got real involved and showed him a great plan and had him bought in as well. So the handoff there was pretty critical just to maintain what they were already building. But obviously that's why Texas A&M got considered, because he had already knew what Colin Klein's plan would be for him. But I just don't think he was ever going to go that far from home. That's probably what hurt Oregon the most, how far from home it was, because he actually did grow up rooting for the Ducks quite a bit too. And Dan Lanning really recruits this region well. Used to be a high school coach in Kansas City. So K-State beats Oregon for Linkon Cure, but I don't think Oregon's going away recruiting this region. They're going to be a thorn.
BY, I got to give you props here because, he was offered on June 10th, 11th in 2023 after he had a K-State camp. K-State was his first scholarship offer in the recruiting process before he blew up. And I was asking you about Linkon Cure at that time, and you said at the time, he didn't, I don't even think he had a STARS evaluation next to his name yet. If he did, it was a lower ranked guy. And you said he would be a 4-star at minimum when he's done, and you thought he would blow up on the recruiting trail. Obviously it came to fruition. He's a 5-star kid. There's only 3 other guys ever in the history of Kansas in the modern day recruiting era to be ranked higher than Linkon Cure in the state of Kansas. And that's Bryce Brown, Arthur Brown, and Andrew Babalola, who's actually in this 2025 recruiting class as well. And then Cure is right behind him as the 4th best. But what do you see on Cure when you watch him that just is so impressive?
He's just a freak, right? He's already, 6'5", approaching 240 pounds, I think, or in that ballpark, and can do things that the best on an athletically, he can do things that the best college football tight ends and NFL tight ends are doing right now, athletically. Now, some of that still has to come together on a football field. He's playing a good one in Kansas. There's going to be a spike in competition. He's a little bit raw still, so he's going to have to learn the ins and outs of what they ask him to do and become a more precise route runner, stuff like that. But those things that he needs to do should come easy as well, because he is so athletic. He is such a freak. Just what he is athletically already at that size and what he's projected to be. You're talking about a guy that can be one of those freaky college football tight ends that gets drafted in the first round. Best case scenario, it's that high of an upside. It's that, sunny of a picture when it comes to his future.
And riding on the heels of obviously a pretty high draftee in Ben Sinnott, I'm sure that was a nice selling point, right? That they could throw out there, but they've done a nice job with tight ends in general. I mean, Daniel Manbeck had a lot of talent. Briley Moore, pretty talented, that is at least having a professional career. So I think decent selling point there, and just sends a pretty big message here to be able to lock this down. I mean, the thing to me, I know I talk about this a lot, but we're just seeing the dynamics of the sport changing so much with the SEC and Big Ten jumping out so far in front of everybody. And now we're starting here in 2024 where you're not going to have Texas and Oklahoma in the conference. It will be tougher and tougher to pull in guys like this that have legitimate interest from those two conferences and teams at the top of those two conferences. I mean, hell, Oregon right there with Ohio State is a favorite to win the Big Ten this year in their first year in the league. So say what you will about him being a fan, growing up a K-State fan, if that gets you the in, it still is not easy to close somebody like that. So it still took a lot of work, man. I mean, those are two programs with about as many resources as anybody in Oregon and Texas A&M that you had to hold them away from.
Yeah, what I will say too, and obviously I don't know how much of a rule is, but despite that, perceived and existing accurate gap that kind of exists now between those conferences and what you're striving to be if you're Kansas State, and perception is reality. I think those kids aren't, naive to it. But from an NIL standpoint, I don't think there is that gap, and that's what helps Kansas State in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, John, you outlined some of the schools. I mean, look, he was offered by the defending national champs, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, Penn State, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Oregon, Tennessee. I mean, you could go down the list. He's been offered by the world. Number 28 player in the country in the On3 industry consensus, number 2 player in the state of Kansas, number 2 tight end in the industry consensus as well. But I'll tell you, when I watch Cure, and keep in mind, it's a 9-minute highlight video, and he had 946 yards, 46 catches, I believe, this year, 14 touchdowns as a junior at Goodland 3A football program out in Western Kansas. But when I watch him on film, you would expect at his size that he's going to out-jump guys for balls. He's going to look like a man amongst boys out there. But what I was really impressed with was just like a guy his size and stature, the way that he moves, his agility, his route running on film when you watch his highlights, his ability to make guys miss, his ability to make guys outrun corners. And, again, I know it's 3A football, but let me outline in a minute some of the things why I'm encouraged by this, and I think he'll translate very well to the Power 4 level of college football. First of all, a couple of analysts' opinions on him. Greg Biggins of 247 Sports, national recruiting analyst, wrote earlier this year, elite route runner, smooth out of his breaks, understands how to change speeds and how to separate, gets easy separation right off the snap, and does a nice job adjusting to the football, wins 50-50 balls, runs really well after the catch, and has high-level body control. A natural pass catcher who never fights the ball and has the ability to snatch it and quickly get up the field. He'll need to gain size and strength to improve as a blocker, but should be an early impact player at this level. On3 has a ride up, and to quote, size and athleticism jump off the film, fluid, natural mover, gets up to full speed quickly, lines up both split out and inline on offense, shows a large catch radius, contorts his body to make high-level grabs, comes down with congested catches in traffic, and has the ability to take it to the house after the catch. Now, yes, it is Western Kansas. It is 3A high school football, so people will question, okay, how will he adjust to the Power 4 level in college football? So he participated in a couple 7-on-7 tournaments, some of the largest 7-on-7s this last offseason. In January, he was at the Battle, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale with numerous blue-chip recruits. Chad Simmons of On3 and Sam Spiegelman of On3 wrote, Cure was a mismatch in the middle of the field and outside the numbers. He has excellent hands and made several receptions in traffic, consistently found holes in the end zone. Cure has a massive catch radius and the athleticism to match as a jumbo-sized receiver who can give fits to opposing defenses and moves well after the catch. Then in March of this year, at a 7-on-7 tournament in Houston with more blue chip recruits, Cure dominated. Inside Texas writer Eric Nolan, who covers the Longhorns, was present at the event and wrote, quote, "The dude glides down the field. He was creating separation on cornerbacks. Not a lot of tight ends are capable of that. Honestly, he was open on just about every play," end quote. I mean, this is a guy that just his fluidity, his natural movement, it makes guys miss. If you watch his highlights, there's a play where there were 6 defenders surrounding him, and he made a move to break free and score a touchdown and elude all 6 defenders. So he's very, very impressive. And I think he's a guy, we can talk about this, but I think he's a guy that can play early just because of his body size, and he'll play more early as a maybe split out tight end than more on the line and play as that jumbo sized receiver.
I kind of leave that to Derek, right? I mean, isn't some of the book on him supposed to be that he is a little raw, like has the athleticism, but Derek was just kind of talking about some of that needs to come together. I was maybe under the impression that he wouldn't play right away.
He's a freak. And those are hard to keep off the field. I'll put it that way.
I guess especially if you're looking at like, hey, we've got what's the window going to be with Avery Johnson there? Might as well get you're out there as soon as possible to work with him.
Yeah, he's a freak. Those guys are hard to keep off the field. What I will say is he's come a long way from a skill standpoint to where he's starting to brush off that raw label just a bit in the last 3 to 6 months. And obviously, being a freak kind of hides those things a little bit too. So, it's going to be tough not to play him as soon as he gets on campus. It's similar to like Avery Johnson, right? When he got to campus, ideally, maybe it would be good for them to be eased in, but at the end of the day, they're so talented. You just have that desire and insatiable, thirst to put them on the field because of how freaky they are. And the same way with Dylan Edwards. I mean, you get those 3 on the field together. That's an semblance of skilled talent that is not typical of K-State.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the last couple of classes here, and you're thinking about the fact that you've got Dylan Edwards, Avery Johnson, and Linkon Cure all potentially being on the field at the same time in 2025. That's pretty impressive and pretty crazy. Starts edging up to the top of the ceiling here that we were thinking for what this program could look like based on the in-state talent that had been coming through in the last couple of years. And I mean, I guess on that front, I don't know if you're talking about the most impressive recruits that have ever come through here. I've got a bounce here, so I don't know. I was going to just throw this to Cole real quick, and maybe you guys can discuss it a little bit more after a break and after I take off. But I mean, Avery, obviously, Josh Freeman is in that conversation. Like Daniel Davis, 5-star junior college recruit. Mark Dunn, 5-star junior college recruit, but that was 20 years ago. I don't know who else is even in that conversation in terms of most important high school recruit that you've landed.
Yeah, I mean, some of those guys, JUCOs, right? You're talking about Daniel Davis. You're talking about Chris Bogus, I think, was a really highly thought of JUCO recruit. There was Pina. Gosh, I'll butcher his last name. And John, you probably know who I'm talking about, but I think he was a 5-star.
I think it was like Penny, wasn't it? It was like Penny.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's nobody from the prep ranks that's been a 5-star recruit to land at Kansas State. And, when you think about, impact over the last few years from a recruiting standpoint, like a guy that gets forgotten about is Gus Hawkins in the 2024 class as well. That's going to be a true freshman on this K-State team. He was the number 1 player in the state last year, according to the On3 industry consensus, shot up to the number 169 player in the country and the On3 consensus rankings, and the number 12 offensive tackle overall. On3 specifically, Adam, is the number 52 player nationally. You look at Linkon Cure, the number 28 player in the On3 industry consensus. He landed Gus Hawkins last year, the best player in the state. The year before that, you land Avery Johnson, the best player in the state, number 104 player in the On3 industry consensus, who was underrated. And now you got Dylan Edwards on your team as well, who was one of the top players in the state and the number 181 player in the On3 industry consensus coming out of high school, and a top 100 player by some recruiting services. So you have really put in some work in the state of Kansas over the last few years, and I think that's significant.
It'll be if Cure were to pass Babalola, and I'll know that's I think that's probably 50-50. I think that's doable. Then you read landing the number one player in the state 3 years in a row. I was seeing if it was 4. I went to 22, but I was Jaron Kanek. So.
Okay. Yeah. Boomer Sooner. Well, again, back to, can I make another Brent Venables $900,000 raise joke here?
Please make fun of him as much as you want.
Oklahoma competing against themselves. I saw Shahan Jayaraja pointed out. He was like, man, the last 3 coaches at Oklahoma to lose to, who was it? It was KU and somebody else in the same season. And it was like John Blake, who got fired, Howard Schnellenberger, who got fired and left to go sell bonds, and then Brent Venables, who got a raise up to $8 million plus per year as a coach. So
it's interesting. On3 I don't know that it existed then, but they've gone back and kind of ranked things the way that they see it. And in that class of 22, they did have Jaron Kanek number 1. Now the industry ranking has Caden Crawford, Iowa signing number 2, Mekhi Miller, Missouri signing number 3. But On3 itself, they actually have Toby number 2.
Okay. All right. Get Toby out on the field this year. Looking forward to that. All right. Home field apparel. I've got my home field apparel on today. So does Derek. Look, shocker. We were recording this the same day as the other day. So it's still the Louisville hoodie for DY if you guys were listening to that. We need to someone get a tracker going. Someone on the Discord, patreon.com/3maw if you want to be a part of the Discord. Just get like a DY tracker on what he has worn every single show. I would like that to become a part of those here. But home field apparel will get you stocked up, whether you want to be like Derek and branch out to 100 plus other teams, or if you want to dive into their 50 plus K-State designs. You can do all of it at homefieldapparel.com, and you can get 15% off your first order using using promo code 3maw23. So once again, get to homefieldapparel.com, promo code 3maw23 to get 15% off your first order. I've got to take off, but these guys will have you the rest of the way.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Well, thank goodness we've dumped John Kurtz now, so now it's just DY and I to talk through the great news of Linkon Cure landing at Kansas State and some other things about Kansas State recruiting. DY, I know we just touched on it right before we went to break, but I guess maybe I'll hit on this with you because K-State struggled a little bit recruiting the state of Kansas historically over, a 10, 15-year period. There were a lot of dudes that left the state of Kansas to go elsewhere. And yes, they're not landing every single guy that they would love to add. And there's a couple dudes in this 2025 class in the state of Kansas that were priorities that they're not going to end up landing. Andrew Babalola being one who's currently ranked as the number 1 player in the state of Kansas. But when you think about what Chris Kleiman and this staff have done over the last few years recruiting the state of Kansas, just how impressive is it? And maybe what has allowed them to be so successful in recruiting the state over the last few years?
Well, what has allowed them to do so is the emphasis they put on the state, and they let people know that they care about those kids. And those kids, when you go back and look, and even in the Bill Snyder days, to be quite honest, if an in-state kid goes to Kansas State, they're not going to be given up on. And those kids tend to have some of the best careers. There's not a lot of Kansas kids that get to Kansas State, of the scholarship ones. They get to Kansas State and fizzle out and just become, unproductive players. Those are the ones that typically are the better players on the team and in some cases go to the NFL. So I think there's a good pedigree there to where you're almost guaranteed a pretty successful stint at the college level if you stay at home and play for Kansas State. So I think that's a big selling point. And just the fact that they've been here now since 2017. So those connections and relationships that they were kind of building in 17, 18, and 19, right? And they had some struggles because they were still getting embedded in the state of Kansas. Well, now they are. So, and you're seeing the fruits of the labor kind of coming and them being rewarded for those efforts. And you're seeing it almost in every class. And this one, you got already on board Martell Jackson and McGuire Richmond. Richmond, the linebacker from Blue Valley. Martell Jackson, the quarterback from Derby. But just put it this way, if you can secure Brock Keith, the offensive lineman out of Blue Valley Northwest, 2-on-3 as a 4-star and in the top 300, and if you can secure offensive tackle Keaton Jones out of Coffeyville, Field Kinley High School, who's a 4-star according to On3 and in the top 300. Then you're talking about 3 of the top 6 or 7 kids in the state again, when you add it to Linkon Cure, and 3 in-state kids. They're all in the top 300, 1 5-star, 2 4-stars. So a lot going well inside the state. 26 seems to be another solid group as well, and we'll see how they can do. Obviously, one that a lot of people have their eyes on will be J.J. Dunnigan, who's a Manhattan High product, and his dad played at K-State. So that'll be an interesting recruit to follow. I could think of Ian Premier. Probably not going to be as highly ranked as Linkon Cure, but another tight end that's going to be heavily recruited by just about everyone in the country, and he's from Great Bend.
Yeah, I think about the potential of the impact that Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, and then Linkon Cure down the road could have on in-state recruiting in the state of Kansas. If those 3 can shine on the football field like we expect them to do, especially this next year with Dylan Edwards and Avery Johnson, it might become an even more prominent storyline with in-state kids wanting to go to Kansas State. It certainly could not hurt. Hey, I did want to ask about the recruiting for Linkon Cure, just the visit, the weekend that he was on Kansas State's campus for his official visit, the photo shoot, everything like that. Obviously I thought it was really cool watching Avery Johnson recruit him, and work him hard to come to Kansas State. That was no surprise, but I wanted to ask you about Dylan Edwards. He was very involved as well. I think there was a story out there that when Cure was on his official visit to Texas A&M, Dylan Edwards was texting Linkon Cure to, the move, get to Kansas State, etc. Just paraphrasing there. Dylan Edwards, it seems like somebody that since he got to campus a month or so ago has really been ingrained in the culture, adapted very well, fitting in very well, and one of the guys that Kansas State is utilizing on recruiting visits because he meshes so well with these guys. Just how impressed, or what have you heard about Dylan Edwards and how he's fitting in at Kansas State?
Yeah, he's a known commodity, right? He's almost a little bit of a celebrity of sorts. A lot of kids know who he is. So he is a recruiting weapon if he wants to be. And ever since he got on campus, and we wrote about this not long ago at K-State Online, just a modeled teammate. Everybody has loved him. He's doing everything right. So I can't say enough good things about what I've heard about Dylan Edwards since he's arrived at Kansas State as a transfer from Colorado. And you're right, he has kind of invested himself and poured himself into the recruiting efforts as well. I think he knows how good he can be in that role, how much he can help the program in that role. He was prominent on a lot of the visits for the transfers as well. He and Avery were both doing this, but a story that I know is when Dylan Edwards decided to pick K-State and committed to Kansas State as a transfer when he was going through his own recruiting process. What was that? The end of April, beginning of May. First thing he did after he knew he was going to Kansas State was he called Linkon Cure and says, "You're coming too." So he is not afraid to be a central figure on the recruiting trail for Kansas State, and certainly willing to do so.
Yeah, I just love what we're hearing there. Work ethic has been tremendous as well. And Dylan Edwards is fitting very well into the culture of Chris Kleiman, this coaching staff, and the Kansas State football program. A few other things on Linkon Cure for those that aren't aware. He won the 110 meter hurdle state title with a time of 14.52 seconds this last year. Missed the state meet record by 0.12 seconds. Also won the 300 meter hurdles with a time of 38.90. Missed the state record by under a second. Won the 300 meter hurdles as a sophomore as well with a time of 40.67. Was the runner-up in the 300 meter state hurdles with the 100 meter state hurdles as a sophomore. Scored 14 points in the 3A state championship basketball game this last year. A tremendous athlete. Also, we talked about, maybe a little bit raw early on. I mean, he only played 4 games as a sophomore in high school as he battled a hamstring injury that sidelined him for the majority of the season. Entering his senior year, he'd only played 13 total high school football games, but obviously had a tremendous year, nearly 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns this last year as a junior. And you combine that with this athleticism and the track times that he put on display. That's a guy that really blew up on the recruiting trail. And I want to talk to you about how he'll fit in, because we had a conversation, how early might he play and how we kind of envision the role. But a couple things as well when he was talking to Kansas State's coaches this offseason. This was a quote in the Topeka Capital Journal earlier this year. Quote, "I know my plan is to eventually develop into a true tight end, but the first couple of years it might be kind of like a jumbo wide receiver. And he also talked about, quote, "We've talked about a lot and gone over film. Cure said of conversations with new offensive coordinators Connor Riley, Matt Wells, and his future position coach, Brian LePack. Quote, me and Coach LePack joke around that I could probably tell you what happens in that play before the video even plays. I have a really good idea of how they're going to use me. I've talked with Coach Riley too, and I absolutely love it. I love their ideas and what they have in hand for this year. So I'm excited to see what they do because it'll be an evolutionized version of Colin Klein's offense a little bit." I just wonder, do you envision him more in a split out role early in his career, or like maybe he's like the modern day tight end, like a Travis Kelce that plays off the line a decent amount and split out wide throughout the majority of his career? What do you see there?
Yeah, I think that's what he is. I don't think he's someone that's going to like be an H-back of sorts, like Ben Sinnott tight end, but he's more of an I would call him a tight end, but he was more of an H-back than he was a Y tight end, so to speak, right? So I think Linkon Cure is probably your depending on what you consider as more of a Y, not someone that's going to like rotate in and out of the backfield at times or go in motion in the backfield like he is someone. I mean, he's going to have to block, and that's probably a little bit of a learning curve too in itself. But everyone that recruits him knows that they're recruiting him to catch the ball more than to block, even though they're going to need him to block and get good at that. Like no one thinks he's an amazing 5-star prospect because of his blocking ability. It's his ability to catch the football in the open field.
What better way to kick off our new partnership with Elanco than a show about K-State football's first 5-star commitment in program history? I know the great K-Staters over at Elanco are celebrating the commitment of Linkon Cure today. And speaking of 5 stars, you're going to get 5-star service from Elanco when choosing them to do your home improvement project. Elanco is a local company based out of Kansas City that's owned by tremendous K-Staters. And in an industry where many home improvement companies have been bought out by national corporations, Elanco's remained locally owned since they started in 1986. You're thinking about getting new windows on your home or doing a bathroom remodel? Elanco specializes in premium window replacements as well as Kohler Luckstone shower systems. Need new siding on your home? The folks at Elanco have you covered there as well, with the best products and top quality service. And you don't need to live in the Kansas City area. Elanco covers much of western Missouri, eastern Kansas, surrounding KC Metro. Live in Manhattan, Emporia, Topeka, or small towns like I'm originally from in Rossville, Kansas, or my wife's hometown of Council Grove. Elanco will come your way and take care of your home improvement needs. Go to elancohome.com. That's ALENCO home.com and check out all of the services they offer, including free estimates. You can also give Sam, a great K-Stater, a call at 913-961-2165. Again, that's 913-961-2165. Sam will get you taken care of and answer any questions you have. Go support Elanco, a terrific local business, family-owned and operated by wonderful K-Staters.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier K-State offered him on June 10, 2023 after one of their camps. Drew Galloway, a colleague, obviously, of DY on KSO and on 3, spoke to Cure the following day. And you guys mentioned earlier that he was a lifelong K-State fan. Cure told Drew this about the K-State offer, quote, "I was overjoyed and in complete shock. I had been dreaming of this since I was a kid. I always told myself I'm going to play here one day. Now I have that opportunity too. I have a permanent smile." End quote. Just really cool to see a K-State kid like this grow up wanting to play at Kansas State. Now, he went through the recruiting process, wanted to see a lot of different places, go through that experience. Credit to him, but it was not a dramatic recruitment in any way. He just wanted to go about, see the country, see what these schools had to offer, and at the end of the day, goes back to the school that he grew up a fan of. Also, I just love this story. 247 Sports had an article from a few months ago, noted his hardworking intangibles, and told a story when he received his offer from Michigan in September. The family was working together, including him, to chop silage to store it and feed it to their cattle. This is a hardworking kid from Western Kansas that I think is going to fit right in at Kansas State and a significant add to the football program moving forward. Cannot wait to see at least 1 year of Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards together. DY, anything to add before we put a wrap on this?
Yeah, and it's like the first part of his recruitment, and I think this is, I don't know if it's important to share, but it's funny to share, and just kind of how the genesis of how it all started, the genesis of his recruitment. So obviously everyone knows that Linkon Cure was offered by Kansas State first, and it was at a camp in Manhattan at the beginning of June of 2022, right? Have I got that right?
23. It was June 10th, 2023. Yeah. It was about, a little more than a year to the day.
He camped somewhere else before K-State, and that school didn't offer. Like, obviously everyone sees this kid. He's kind of this 5-star no-brainer. He ends up with, he could have named his school, right? He has about every Power 4 offer there is to have. Yeah, but there was a school that had him on campus, and he worked out in front of them, and they didn't offer. That was Colorado. He camped there first, and they didn't see enough to offer him.
So was that Dion? Was Dion the coach at that time?
Yep, last summer.
Wow. Did Colorado end up offering after the fact, or did they just know they'd screwed up?
No, I don't know.
I didn't know if they were the one program out there that did not offer him, because I mentioned it earlier. I mean, Linkon Cure has been offered by the who's who of college football. I think I started listing out everybody. I don't think I mentioned USC earlier. They also offered him. Look, he took officials to KU, Oregon, A&M, and K-State. But in 2023, he unofficially visited schools such as Penn State, Notre Dame, Auburn, Nebraska, and others. And, I think at one point, DY, we kind of perceived before Oregon, I think it was maybe a few months ago, we were worried about Notre Dame, weren't we?
Notre Dame would have been a problem, but they got their tight end and kind of pivoted away. But they might have been a problem.
Yeah, I remember we were at the Wildcat NIL golf tourney back in October last year for the men's basketball team, and we were chatting about Notre Dame. I think he was getting ready to visit Notre Dame, or had just freshly come off a visit there, and that was one that gave us a little bit of anxiety in Linkon Cure's recruitment, but the end of the day, he ends up at Kansas State, and we cannot wait to watch him. Significant pull for this K-State coaching staff and the 2025 recruiting class, and we'll see what else they can do to finish off that class with some studs as Kansas State continues to pull in top talent within the state of Kansas. DY, appreciate you breaking this down, and appreciate John for kicking us off to start the show. And as always, appreciate our partners over at Home Field Apparel and Holiday Distillery. Get over to Holiday Distillery or get to your local liquor store. Pick up some Ben Holiday bottled in bond bourbon or 360 vodka if that is your preference. And get to homefieldapparel.com. Discount code 3MOM23. Score 15% off at the time of your purchase for the entire order. Also, if you like this, if you like the show, you like 3MOM, we continue to try and grow it. It helps us if you hit the like button. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button on the YouTube version of this pod. Subscribe to the KCSN YouTube version of the channel on YouTube if you like to watch us on YouTube. That helps. And leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, whatever it is that you listen to for your audio platform. Leave us a review there. We'd love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Appreciate all of you, and appreciate you for listening to another episode of 3MOM.